back to the video, and this movie has a spoiler-free review of Jugjugg Jeeyo. Cuckoo and Naina are going through relationship problems and now they need to break it to their family that they want a divorce. Cuckoo's parents, Beam and Geeta, are a couple that everyone looks up to, and they make their lives much worse as Beam is having an affair that stirs up the pot. They have their own plans and a set of surprises in store for the young couple. All this is in the middle of Cuckoo's sister's wedding. So if you guys are new here and you enjoy all my movie reviews, TV show reviews, breakdowns, and reactions, make sure to hit that subscribe button and notifications on so you don't miss any time I open a video or I go live. But wasting more time, let's get into it. So going into this movie, I honestly did not know much about the story. I just saw it in my local theater. I was like, okay, we're gonna go watch it. And I think the concept here is actually really cool. I thought they did a great job following these two separate couples from different generations. And I thought it was really well done. It's definitely a cheesy idea following couples from different generations, seeing how all their relationship problems play out, all the different twists and turns in the story. And I'm not gonna get into too much detail as to the result because I don't want to spoil anything, but as the synopsis says, there is an affair in the older relationship, and I really love how they play out all of these different ideas. They do reveal that kind of stuff in the trailer, so I think it's an important aspect in terms of marketing, but personally I was glad to go into this movie not knowing anything at all. But again, this movie could have ended up being just another boring, cheesy Bollywood marriage story that's kind of more of like spectacle over story, and at times it is. I definitely feel like that is a problem that this movie has, but in terms of the story being unique, I think it does just enough in terms of switching it up, especially like the familial aspect of things. I think it switches it up enough to make it not that cheesy. I'll also say it's definitely drawn out at times. The whole idea of the way that everything progresses in this story is very just forward. It feels like the story is moving and not necessarily the characters. It feels like every action, every moment is forced upon the characters. Every single thing comes to the characters. The characters themselves never feel like they're making a choice to progress the story. It feels like the story is always progressing and they just have to follow. I'll also say in terms of the way this story is told, it's definitely sidelining the main two characters at times. At least our main character, Cuckoo, he is the one that's in between all of this as he's the son of Beam and he's the one that's having an affair and he has to kind of process all of this stuff. And the actor is great in this movie. The acting overall, I'll get into later, it's pretty good here, but I definitely feel like they sideline them at times, and that's just gonna happen when you have these two prominent storylines that the entire movie is based around. But the reason I bring this up is because literally the first 15 minutes of this movie is so fast and they get right to the point, and then obviously, you know, they cut to 5 years later and we see their marriage falling apart, and then all the stuff happens, everything goes into play with the sister's marriage, all that kind of stuff. So I thought that the way they paced this first like 15 minutes of the movie was really fast, and I was like, okay, like we're moving, and then they just slow it down and all the tension breaks and I didn't really feel anything. And after the first 15-20 minutes, it felt like the whole rest of the movie was just, like I said before, the story was forcing the characters to do stuff. It wasn't necessarily the characters making moves to progress the story. I think that's a big issue with the pacing overall in this movie. The pacing was weird. A lot of Bollywood, Tollywood, just Indian movies in general, they definitely take their time, and a lot of them do have distinguished acts, but this movie didn't necessarily have that. And I think it's because of how fast the very beginning of the movie moved. We had so much development for these characters, relationships, all that kind of stuff, that as we started to progress through the movie, it didn't feel like anything was stuck to a structure. And that can be good, but in this case, I don't think that's the best thing, because everything that developed over time depended on one character relationship and then another character relationship. It wasn't based around a whole story that affects every single character in the room. So I think that just really messes up the pacing. And also when it comes to reveals, again, it feels like they're forced to just move the story over. And I think that makes this movie more of a drama than a comedy. Obviously, people would classify this as a dramedy, which is the mix of the both. But the comedy for me personally, it did hit. But I will say it did feel weird to have that drama and comedy mix, because this is a pretty heavy topic. They're talking about literally two divorces going on at the same exact time. Like, it's not a funny thing, and they try to make it a funny thing a lot of times, and that doesn't necessarily work for me. But there's this one actor called Manish Paul, and he's a comedian that was in this movie. He's absolutely phenomenal. He plays Naina's brother, and he was hilarious. I laughed a lot during this movie, and I laughed out loud. Many people in my theater weren't laughing, but it was a good time. I won't say the comedy was bad, but at times it just felt out of place for what this story was going for. Varun Dhawan and Kiara Advani were also great in this movie. I thought they had some great emotional moments, but overall it just felt like the tension between characters was weirdly broken again, and that was just to progress the story. But the acting itself is great in this movie. Again, it's cheesy. It's a cheesy Bollywood romance marriage story. Like, there's not much else you can expect, but I do feel like at times it did get to the point where I was like, okay, like, we understand, like, you don't have to drag this scene out for a little bit longer. Anil Kapoor was also good in this movie, and I will say there are a lot of small emotional moments, and there's like one or two big ones per actor, but it's something too spectacular. It's something that I'm going to be looking back on this movie on for the performances, but the whole cast has emotional scenes here and there, so I think it works. But I will say, when it comes to emotions, it did feel like they were kind of emotion baiting us with the music and the sounds and the effects in this movie, and so I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. That's kind of what this story is here to do for us, but it did feel like at times they were forcing it upon us with different sound effects and sound cues that were sprinkled throughout the entire movie. It's like you hear it in the very beginning, you hear that same sound at the end, it's supposed to ring some emotional tone. It didn't necessarily do that for me, but maybe it did for other people. It just felt like more of a cheap way to actually get us to feel the emotions, because it's a callback to a previous moment that was very, very emotional, unlike the one that we're hearing it in for now. But as a whole, Jugjugg Jeeyo is cheesy and follows some tropes from Indian movies about marriage and love, but the story following a young and older generation couple is pretty unique, and if you enjoy these types of movies, you might end up liking this one. Overall, I give Jugjugg Jeeyo a 6.5 out of 10. If you've seen or want to check out this movie, let me know what you think of it in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.